Oh, I'll be brave if you're brave. I'll be brave, but only if you're brave. And it could be just you and me. We'll be family. Just wait and see.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's segment of the Lung Cancer Living Room, our breaking news, if you will, story that we're bringing to you today is about the epidemiology of young lung cancer study that our medical institute, the Adario Lung Cancer Medical Institute, is currently running. We're very excited to have with us today Dr. Jorge Nieva, Associate Professor of Clinical Medicine at Keck Hospital of USC, Norris Cancer Hospital, and Barbara Gilletts, who has been played a role in the living room multiple times over the years. So welcome back to Dr. Gitlitz, who is Medical Director of Product Development at Genentech and Adjunct Clinical Associate Professor of Medicine in a voluntary position also at USC with Dr. Nieva. And then, of course, we have Stephen Huff, who is also no stranger to being a guest here at the Lung Cancer Living Room, who is an advocate and survivor. So welcome to all of you. For those of you who may not know me or are not familiar with the Lung Cancer Living Room, I'm Danielle Hicks. I'm Chief Patient Officer here at GoTo Foundation for Lung Cancer. And I'm really excited to bring this meeting to all of you today and every time we bring it. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Before we jump into the program, we have a lot to cover today. I will ask our speakers if they wouldn't mind, and Dr. Nieva, we'll start with you to tell us a little bit about who you are and why you chose lung cancer as your area of specialty.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and thanks so much for the opportunity to participate today. So my name is Jorge Nieva. I'm an oncologist at the University of Southern California. And I got into lung cancer early in my training. It must have been around the year 2001, 2002, when I was doing my fellowship and noticed that there was, lots of work, lots of attention being paid to breast cancer and a number of other cancers. But I had so many patients with lung cancer, and it was such a terrible disease, and we had so little understanding of it and so few good medications that I said, this is really where the need is. This is where we need to put in a research effort. And so when it came time to, try to write research proposals, I always focused on lung cancer early on, and I've been doing it ever since.
That's great. Thank you for joining us again. Dr. Gitlitz, how about you?
Yeah, I think Jorge and I are two peas in a pod. I had the same experience in my training of seeing the research and development in other cancers, and lung cancer seemed to be, kind of an orphan. And despite being such a killer of men and women, not much change was being made in the treatments. So, I felt it was just my career path, my crusade, to see if I can do something there. And, I had great mentors that helped me along that pathway. And, lo and behold, I don't think, Jorge and I knew back then that, in a few short years, lung cancer would be such an interesting, disease with so much hope with targeted therapies and immunotherapies. So, I think we made the right choice, the right decision, and I'm just so happy to be here right now and being in this time of great strides and hope.
Thank you so much. The lung cancer community is most definitely lucky to have both of you on the team. Stephen, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Give us a little bit of background on your story.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you so much for including me on this tremendous panel. It's really an honor to be here. And so my name is Stephen Huff. I live in Franklin, Tennessee. I grew up in Tennessee. I played baseball at Austin Peay, and I'm currently a high school teacher here. So Um, I I am here because I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer at the age of 29, just a few months before my wedding date, and with no family history, no exposure, and not smoking myself, being an athlete. It was a shock, but I think just like many other lung cancer patients, I don't necessarily fit that criteria, or at least what I thought was the criteria. But I can tell you that in our Nashville community or greater Nashville community, I'm in the clinics quite a bit, and I see more and more patients just like myself, young, healthy, etc. And so I'm here today because I am the benefit of some great research and some breakthrough treatments that have kept me stable for almost 4 years. And so, as a matter of fact, I hit my 4-year cancerversary in about a month. So it's approaching fastly. But I would love to share my story as it relates to the hope and the excitement around what research bring, especially to patients, my other patients that I've met through other various programs. And because of this, I can't emphasize how much and how important cancer research is. So I'm so very blessed to be here. Thank you.
We are absolutely thrilled to have you. And I think I met Stephen fairly shortly after you got married and after you were diagnosed out in Tennessee. We had a great dinner with you and your beautiful wife. What you didn't share was the exciting thing that has happened in those 4 years since diagnosis. I don't know if you want to just touch on that for a second.
Yes, I would love to, Danielle. It's part of why research is so important to me, especially, what we're going to talk about today is I have been gifted this time and this duration with my family and friends. And with this time, my wife and I decided about 2.5 years ago that we wanted to start a family of our own. Being newly married, being young, we said, what do we got to lose? So we did it. We made the leap. We went to Nashville Fertility Clinic, and we started a family. We welcomed our son on January 29th of 2020, right before COVID started. And so I joke with everyone that I have been on 1.5 years of paternity leave because I am teaching from home, working remotely. So he is the biggest blessing in my life today. So
That's great. And he's absolutely adorable. If you don't already follow Stephen on social media, you can be sure to see some amazing family photos that come out of that. So welcome to all of you. With that, I think we should jump right in. And before we get into talking about epidemiology and what that is, I want to step back a little bit and talk about young lung cancer and where this sort of research journey began, again, with the Adarial Lung Cancer Medical Institute. And Barbara, I know you were intimately involved back in the day when this started. So can you explain a little bit why the decision was made to study lung cancer in this younger subset of the population?
Sure. At the time, I was faculty full-time at USC. I was attending meetings with the group, the Adarial Lung Cancer Medical Institute. And, it came to our awareness, people like Stephen. There's this woman named Jill Costello who was a college student at UC Berkeley and an athlete, a never smoker. And at 21 years of age, she was diagnosed with metastatic lung cancer. So this tragedy and this awareness, and then with that one case, your mind is open to that awareness, and then again, just like Stephen, all these other cases were flooding in of young, mostly women at that time, healthy athletes, never smokers and in the prime of their life, marathon runners, swimmers, developing lung cancer. And this, kind of gave a shout out to something that needed to be done, that this population needed to be studied. And, from retrospective single institution looks at their data, we saw that these patients tended to have enrichment for drivers of their cancer, what we call oncogenic drivers like EGFR and ALK and ROS1. So we felt that we needed to study these people. We needed to study prospectively the characteristics of these people, their age, characteristics of their cancer, what types of cancers they have, and really do a deep dive and look about the genomic drivers driving their cancers. So we started this protocol, Genomics of Young Lung Cancer, similar to the Epidemiology of Young Lung Cancer. And we also had to do some creative thinking about how we would find these people, because it is rare. Probably less than 2 or 1% of all lung cancers are on people less than age 40, where we set the bar. So we decided that we'd have a website, the World Wide Web, so patients didn't have to walk into actual brick and mortar cancer clinic to be able to consent to this trial. And, this concept that Bonnie Adario herself bringing research to patients, and with the help of patient groups and the World Wide Web, we were able to accrue 133 patients on this trial. And it showed that, again, they tended to be women. The median age was about 34. The vast majority, over 85%, were adenocarcinomas. They tend to be never smokers, and over 80% of them had a driver mutation, which is very different from the general population of lung cancer, about 35%, so more than double. And, our goal was to set the stage for future trials to look at environmental and epidemiologic causes. And, I think we were successful on two parts. Going back to Jill, she wanted to be an ambassador of awareness. And, I think she fulfilled that. She did pass away at age 22 several years ago, but, she was an ambassador of awareness. She brought this to our attention and to the world. And also through Genomics of Young Lung Cancer, we have set the stage for epidemiology of young lung cancer. So it was very, very successful.
Yeah, I think you brought up Bonnie, and for those of you who know her, she's a force to be reckoned with. And the situation that happened with Jill that Dr. Gilletts was talking about was really sort of this eye opener for her and others, obviously, about what is happening here. And I think one of the things that Bonnie did, Jill had a best friend and a woman that was in her sorority who decided, in order to raise awareness for lung cancer, she was going to run from New York to San Francisco. And so Bonnie got on the horn and was, trying to get some press around this, like, hey, let's make some noise. And people were saying, well, where's the data on young lung cancer? Like, who's looking at it? And the sort of short answer was no one, right? And so, again, everyone knowing Bonnie the way that they do, no one wasn't a great answer. So this study was put together in fairly short order, as Dr. Gitlitz said, and the foundation played and other foundations played a big role in doing some of that outreach. And it just goes to show you that with some of these more innovative ideas, you can really get some of these things done quickly. Dr. Gitlitz, can you talk you mentioned the remote consenting. Can you talk a little bit about how that might be different from the way a traditional consenting is done in this sort of study or trial?
Sure. I just want to mention one other thing about Bonnie. At that time, she was, really a real proponent that not all lung cancer is the same, that there are multiple slices of this big pie that we call lung cancer, and she was determined, to identify different slices of that pie. And, that goes on to today, where we're still looking for new driver mutations, new biomarkers, new ways that we can, treat patients. So, very forward thinking. So remote consent, before I forget. So yes, we set up a website through the through the USCIRB and through the Adario Lung Cancer Foundation, where people, patients can drive other patients to this website. And there was a short questionnaire to see if you qualified. Pretty much, were you less than age 40 when you were diagnosed with lung cancer? Do you have non-small cell lung cancer? If so, contact this number. And we had a project manager, and she could send them consent forms, and everything could be done online. the Lung Cancer Foundation thought of everything we were able to remotely collect blood and specimens and store them and route them. It was a very smooth running machine, really amazing for what for that time. And now there are many different patient groups on social media that share research and contribute to research. So, this was 2014, and now we're in 2021, and we all know how social media can influence and move things forward. I think
It's
that's
true,
one
and
of
I
the most
think
positive ways of social media.
I agree, and I think it's again this sort of innovative way of sort of thinking outside of the box in order to make studies like this easily accessible to the subset of the population, really sort of set a precedence, because we're seeing things like this happen more and more. So it's all.
Sorry to overtalk. We recruited people from all over the world, all over the United States, all over Europe, Middle East, Australia. It was really, really quite amazing. What we were able to accomplish.
Bonnie likes to tell the story, and so I'll share it really quickly before we sort of move into the second piece of this about some of those blood draws and making it easy for patients. One of the young patients who participated early on in genomics of young lung was from Australia, and she was having trouble getting her blood drawn there. So she and her husband and children were planning a vacation anyway, and they decided to come out to San Francisco, and we worked to get a phlebotomist sent out to their hotel so we could get the blood draw for her, and it all sort of worked out. And so there are many ways to get things done, and I'm so proud of the team that worked together to do this so that we could gather this information that has brought us to kind of where we are today and sort of the next step in this. And so, and this is a question for both Dr. Nieva and Dr. Gilletts, but based on these findings from the genomics of young lung cancer study, what has sort of happened since then, and how did that study support the need for further studies in this subset, and what does that have to do with what we're going to be talking about today?
Well, I think the first thing that happened is we realized how little we know. Lung cancer is interesting as compared to a lot of other cancers. If you look at a lot of other tumors, when they affect people that are young, very frequently those patients will have been born with some mutation that led to a predisposition for cancer. So you hear about genes like BRCA1 and BRCA2, or genes like MEN1 or 2, things that people are born with these abnormalities, they're passed on from parent to child. But none of that happens in lung cancer, or at least doesn't happen, very commonly at all. The mutations that Barbara and her team identified were not mutations that people can be born with. All these mutations that she found are lethal at the embryo development stage. So we found that, yes, these patients that have lung cancer are young. They frequently have EGFR mutations and ALK mutations, and they weren't born with any of them. So the question is, how do you get them? Where does that come from? Why is it that one person gets it and not another? And that really brought to bear the need for an epidemiology study, a study that looked at what is the relationship between this disease, the abnormalities in the tumor that we identified, and all the various genes that Barbara found in her study, and what does that mean for causes? Because it's not tobacco. That much we know that much. It's something that's not tobacco. It's not fried food. It's not it's not that these people are heavy. There's something else, and so we really need to start thinking and asking a lot of questions about why is this phenomenon happening, and particularly in women, why is it increasing? Because we are seeing more young women, particularly women who live in wealthier countries, being diagnosed with lung cancer at earlier ages.
So sorry, I'm just taking some notes here because I want to make sure to come back to something that you said. So what you're saying, I just want to make sure that the community watching right now understands what we're looking at in a study, an epidemiology study, is not necessarily anything clinically related or health related. As you said, it's not something somebody was born with. It didn't come from some of the known sort of causes of such a disease, but something else. So, what type of information are we seeking to gather? You touched on a couple of things, but if we could dive a little bit deeper, because I know let me step back again. I get this question a lot, and the helpline team here at GoTo gets this question a lot. People want to know why, how, why did I get lung cancer? How did I get lung cancer? And it's not just lung cancer. I think, with any diagnosis, people are looking for a reason. And so this type of a study is to help to sort of further identify and button down commonalities that might point to such a thing as a reason or a cause, correct?
Exactly. So the first thing we do is we recognize that lung cancer is not one disease. So we're going to separately analyze the EGFR patients from the ALK patients, from the KRAS patients. And we got that insight from Barbara's data that, lung cancer is not one disease. Every one of these subtypes needs to be looked at separately. And then we're going to ask a lot of questions. And so for the people who've enrolled in this study, God bless you all. Because the survey that we ask you to complete is long and detailed. And it's going to ask you things about where you lived, what other problems you have, what kind of jobs have you had, what have you worked with in your jobs, what's your birth order. There's a survey for your birth mother to complete. What's your diet? What do you do about physical activity, alcohol, smoking, reproductive and menstrual history? All these things get asked about in detail, and then we're going to have some very smart epidemiologists, some very smart statisticians take all that data from all the participants and crunch them together, and then we're going to ask, what's different about these people? What are the unique features? And if I knew what the unique feature was, I wouldn't have to ask. But we think that we're going to find something that tells us, perhaps we're going to find out that, everybody with a ROS1 mutated cancer always had a first floor bedroom. Literally, this is the level of detail that we're asking about. So we don't know what we're going to find. It's a very broad survey. And we're hoping that we're going to find something useful and something that's going to tell us a little bit about the biology of all these separate forms of lung cancer.
It's so
I might
fascinating.
add, we're even going to speak to their moms. I mean, there's even a survey for their birth mom if they, if they're around and willing to fill it out. So
I'm curious about that question too, and that was going to be one of my follow-on questions. Why the birth mother? Is it something about her particular history, or is it just that she's more likely to know what her child did growing up than anyone else?
We're going to ask questions about in utero exposures and things like that.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it's fascinating. This type of study is fascinating to me, and I think one of the things that makes it so cool is it's something that people can do from anywhere, right? You don't need to go to your health center or to a doctor's office or a clinic to participate in this. So it really does sort of open those doors and allow people to be a part of the solution. So who qualifies for? Before I ask for who qualifies for this, because I think it's the same as who qualified for genomics of young lung. Barbara, how did we come up with 40 as a cutoff, or why?
This is. It's the adolescent and young lung, the adolescent and young adult, definition, less than 40.
Yeah.
As you get older, more and more things will confound that, more more exposures. The older you are, the more you've moved around, different exposures. Unfortunately, the older that we get, we take on more mutations. So it's just not as pure, if you will, as studying a younger population. We have this amazing opportunity. It's like, would you rather find a needle in a haystack, or would you rather find a needle in a half a bale of hay? I don't know, something, much more small, to be able to examine this population that's so enriched for these oncogenic drivers versus just the general population of lung cancer. You have such a higher chance of finding something and studying less people. So this is just such an amazing, opportunity that we have. And, we're so grateful for Stephen and for every person that, dives into that questionnaire.
Yeah, that's great. So now let's get into sort of some of the nitty gritty about who qualifies. We know it's this under 40 population, but Dr. Nieva, can you talk a little bit about some of the other must-haves or must-dos to qualify for this study?
So you must live in the United States, and that's something that was something we just couldn't get around, just from a logistic standpoint. And then you do have to have had comprehensive biomarker testing, and it doesn't matter what the result was; you just have to have had it, and you have to be under 40, and then you have to have a big enough heart to complete the survey. That's the other thing that we ask of you.
Can you talk a little bit, just for some of those who watching who might not know what comprehensive biomarker testing is? Can you explain that to the folks watching?
Of course. So comprehensive biomarker testing means that you've had some attempt to understand what is the driver of your cancer. And most of that nowadays is best done through a technique called next generation sequencing or whole transcriptome sequencing. These are techniques that look at the DNA inside the tumor itself and look to see what was the change in the DNA that started this cancer. And so, was it a mutation in EGFR? Was it a mutation in ALK? Was it ROS1? Was it KRAS? You should, at minimum, in the United States, have testing for at least 9 genes, and that is the bare minimum. And unfortunately, most people in the United States don't even get that. The incidence of good testing is too low, and I'm really thankful that the GoTo Foundation makes that message one of their main messages, that people with lung cancer need to have good testing done. But for the majority of patients seen now in an academic medical center like USC or UCLA or another large center, they'll have next generation sequencing done. So they'll have over 400 genes looked at, and will really have a very good understanding of what was driving the cancer. You need to have had good testing done, and in order to participate in the study, because we want to make sure that we have you categorized into the correct group.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important that folks understand that for 2 reasons. 1, to know whether or not they qualify for the study, but 2, to your point, that if they haven't had this testing done, that it's a conversation they need to have with their doctors about, getting access to this type of diagnostics, because it is so very important. One of the things you talked about is it being U.S. only study, and I know that's a little bit different than the way we ran genomics of young lung cancer, in that was a worldwide study. Can you talk about, because I know we've got folks that are watching that maybe did participate in the genomics study and are wanting to know why they can't participate in this. Talk a little bit about, I don't want to call it clean data, but what happens here in the United States might not be what is happening in Australia, and demographics or geography are a good example of that.
Right, and it's exactly that. It's when you talk to the epidemiologists, the people who do this type of stuff all the time, there's there's a lot of variability in soil conditions, in food content, in understanding of languages and other practice habits and exposures. And the science of epidemiology is such that the population needs to be somewhat narrowed. Um, and if we could have done this study and only done it in a 10 square mile area in Los Angeles, we would have the cleanest data, because then everything would be controlled for a very small group. And so we had to basically draw the line somewhere in terms of limiting the population, while at the same time making sure that we have enough patients to be able to get the data we need. And so for that reason, the study is going to be limited to the United States.
Yeah, I'd
Great,
like to,
thank you.
like the epidemiologists can look up zip codes where they were born, were they close to a nuclear plant, a nuclear power plant, were they, close to a factory farm, so it's much easier to do, as Jorge said, in one place in the United States.
That's great. Thank you both. Oh, go ahead.
And it's, those other databases that exist for the United States that may not exist in other countries that need to be integrated as well.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. I didn't want people to think that we weren't being inclusive, and let them know that there was rhyme and reason to making that one of the qualifying criteria. So you did mention the blood draw. Can you explain a little bit about the purpose of the blood draw, that to go ahead and coincide with some of this data that we'll be collecting through the surveys?
Of course. Well, we are collecting blood so that the best DNA and genetic and scientific laboratories out there in the US can use the newest technologies to find disease associations. So one of the things that happens when people have their tumor DNA analyzed, they ask, well, does it analyze all the genes in the cancer? And the answer is no. It doesn't analyze all the genes in the cancer. It analyzes a subset of the genes that are known to be associated. But that's just a small percentage of all the DNA that's in the body and in the cells. And so we want to look at all of it. And we want to have laboratories in academic centers that are using the latest techniques, not just looking at the DNA sequence itself, which of course is very important, but also the patterns that in which genes are turned on and off. Because here we are in the year 2021, we're actually pretty good at looking at all the genes that we know about, all the genes that make proteins in our bodies. And we've had those looked at for a long time, and we've not found familial causes of young lung cancer, for example. And so what we really want to look at are not the genes that make the proteins, but the DNA sequences around proteins. Because as you know, most of our DNA doesn't actually code for a protein, doesn't code for a gene. It just gives signals as to which gene to look at. And so we want to look at those areas as well, those areas that are non-coding DNA regions. And we want to look at how DNA gets modified over the course of a lifespan, using this chemical technique that our body uses called methylation, that turns some genes on and some genes off and does that kind of regulation. When you start looking at it, the amount of data that's generated from a single patient specimen is enormous. And it takes very sophisticated analyses to look at. So sophisticated that we're not going to have just one person do it. But when we collect these blood samples, we're going to take them, divide them up into specific volumes, and then we have several different laboratories They're going to look at it using their own techniques, using the latest things out there, so that if there is something to find, we're going to have lots of opportunities to find associations.
And this is because I'm trying to sort of jump ahead and guess about some questions we might get afterwards. So I'm trying to ask them now to kind of cut them off at the pass. This is a single blood draw, correct?
Yes.
And for a person who maybe is not all that keen on, going out for an extra appointment, even if it is just for a blood draw, is this something that can be tacked on to an already scheduled draw? In other words, if they're already going in for blood work, to have an extra vial or two or however many you need taken at the same time?
Absolutely. And we've even arranged for phlebotomy services to be able to come to people's home as well, to have it done without having to go to another place, or you can go to a lab place if that would be more convenient for you. We want to make this as easy as possible, because we know that what the participants give us is a gift. It's a gift of their time. It's a gift of their blood, literally, and we want to be as respectful of that as we can, and make it as easy as possible, while still doing the best science we can do.
I love that. I love that you said that. And I also love that it's an opportunity for the so many folks I talk to who have been diagnosed to give back in some way. Because I do get that question a lot, like how can I give back to this community to help further research? And I think that's a perfect segue into Stephen. Here we're talking about all sort of the ins and outs and what is an epidemiology study, how do you participate? But you're the guy who's been there and done it. So can you talk a little bit about your experience in participating in the study?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd like to preface it with I'd like to highlight the importance of the study, as you guys have so eloquently outlined earlier in the discussion. It's, when you look at young lung cancer, I look at it as a totally different or separate disease, because in my opinion, young adults, we're just at such a different point in our life than sometimes maybe the generally statistically diagnosed. And what I mean by that is, I think about the age. I was not too far removed from my parents' insurance. I was on my own insurance. I was starting my new career path. I was beginning my marriage, and so dealing with some of these issues can be so taxing, and can be so difficult. And to know that there is a study like the epidemiology study that is solely focused on patients like myself, it is so refreshing. It gives me so much hope, and it really does motivate me to advocate, to try and recruit other patients to enroll, because as we all know, the more information we have, the smarter we are, and the better results that we can yield. So as far as the study itself, it's so easy. Dr. Nieva joked about the survey, and yes, it is. It's long, and it's very detailed, and you may not remember all of the answers. You may not necessarily be able to, but do your best. I'm a teacher, and so I'm used to just saying, "Hey, do your best. Try to remember what you can, and just keep moving forward." Because I think it's so important to know how essential this study is, and how essential it is to know why young people are being diagnosed with lung cancer. We ask that question all the time. Why? Is it environment? Is it lifestyle? Is it genetic risk factors? And so as a patient, we know that there's power in information. And so the more that we can do to yield that information, and give that, and put that in the hands of the right researchers, we can really make an impact. And so if it means filling out a questionnaire, sign me up. I'll do as many as I can. If it means doing a blood draw, let me know where to go. I'll be there, in 10 minutes. And so the eagerness that I am seeing from my fellow young lung cancer patients is great. But as we know with anything, we don't need to settle. We need to keep pushing. We need to be ambassadors for this tremendous study. And so I think that's why we're all here, and that's our part as patients. That's what we can do to help push the needle forward.
Stephen, did your mom fill out the birth mother questionnaire?
She was more than happy. My mother is she actually works in cancer research, not lung cancer, but she works in cancer research. And so she was more than happy to help and help in any way that she could. And she's actually helping to recruit other mothers of other cancer patients.
Nice. How long did it take you to fill out the survey? And can you talk about like the pacing that you were allowed to do it in, the timing? Yeah.
Sure. I think, everyone is so different. I think it depends on how meticulous you are and how detail oriented you can be as a person. I know someone that completed the survey in 45 minutes, I think is what someone told me they did it. It took me about an hour and a half to 2 hours. I work pretty quick. I think everyone is different. And so it's, I guess that's the best answer I got.
And I think there is a 2-week window, right, from the time you start the survey to the time you complete it. So you can, to your point, Dr. Gilletts, pace yourself. If you aren't that one who's just like a sit down, get it done, type of man or woman, you can just sort of set aside 15 or 20 minutes a day and kind of plug away at it and come back
Absolutely.
later. So I think that's a nice perk to this study too. I'm curious if depending upon what we ultimately find from this study, if this study or studies like it have the potential to sort of make movement in other areas, whether it's other cancers or studies that will follow on from something like this. What does this typically look like when the results sort of do finally come in, particularly if they show some of these commonalities that we were talking about earlier?
Well, I think we're certainly going to want to do follow-up surveys depending on what we find. So those follow-ups will be much better targeted if we find something. So let's imagine that we find that, everybody who has a EGFR mutated cancer, mother gave them, carrots at a young age. Well, then we'll be, doing a lot of analysis of what's in carrot and what kind of DNA happens there. And then we're going to do a follow-on survey of, regions that have, carrot farming and regions that don't. And I say that, as something that, is probably not what we're going to find, but let's say we did, that those would be the natural next questions that would come about, where we would try to confirm the associations and continue to do follow-on science to try to understand why is this happening, and then what is there something different we can do about it. Let's say in this blood draw, for example, we find that the thing that all these people with EGFR mutated lung cancer have in common is a particular DNA sequence that's not in EGFR, but is somewhere else, but actually drove the development of the mutation. Well, then you can imagine that we could then do a follow-up study where we screen large populations for the presence of that DNA sequence, or know that, okay, well, that DNA sequence is present in, this country much more than it is in that country. So should we do differential screening, for example? Would we do then low-dose CT scans in people who have the DNA sequence that we identified? One can imagine a lot of follow-up questions that you would ask, and that's the nature of science, right? That, whenever you answer a question, you immediately ask a dozen more, and so we never really finish. So I don't think that we're going to finish this study and say, "Aha, it's settled. This is what happened." We're going to do this study and say, "Okay, now let's move on to the next step."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, the ultimate would be, to find something that you can screen for or find something that you can prevent. That would be the ultimate. Are we going to get that answer right away from this trial? Who knows? But like Jorge said, we probably need follow-on trials.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's this type of study is absolutely fascinating to me. The things you can find, and I know, you were using the carrot analogy, but I mean, who knows? If not a carrot, maybe it's a beet, or you know, it could be anything. The type of paint in your house. Like, I just think it's absolutely fascinating. This type of study. We just got a little note from Michelle. A lot of you watching, and of course, those of you participating in the panel today know Michelle. She is the spearheader of this living room program, and she just let us know that there are 3 people online watching right now who signed up for the study this morning, and 2 folks who hadn't signed up yet, but now that they've been watching this program are looking into it. So with that, I kind of want to go into, I want to be mindful of time. I want to go into a little bit about how to participate and how to recruit. And I think you all heard, Stephen give sort of his PSA announcement for it. And I think that's amazing. And what better way to engage and encourage folks to participate than by word of mouth from someone who's done it. So if you are watching and you have participated or currently in the process of enrollment, and I think there's about 64 folks out there right now in the process of enrollment, I encourage you to share this. Dr. Nieva and Dr. Gilletts talked a little bit earlier about some of these subgroups from a biomarker status, whether it's the EGFR group or the ALK group or the ROS1 group, KRAS kickers and others. This is also a subset, right? This young lung cancer population, and knowing and being able to work with a lot of you over the years, I know you all know one another. So spread the word loud and spread it proud. The more quickly we can get this study enrolled, the more quickly we can get all the important information that you're so generously giving us looked at, researched, and hopefully we'll be able to find some really amazing things. So I know it's come up on the screen a couple of times here how to participate. And it's, as I mentioned, the Dario Lung Cancer Medical Institute, our medical institute. The website is alcmi.net/research/EOYLC. Or of course you can call. We've got some lovely folks, Allison and others on the end of the line, ready and willing and able to answer any of your questions. And that phone number is 888-443-6952 or 888-44-EOYLC. So please check it out. If you go to the website, there's a really quick little questionnaire you can take, qualifying questionnaire that you can take to see if you qualify and participate. And if you do participate, please feel free to reach out to myself or anyone else here at GoTo and let us know about your experience, because we always love that feedback from everyone. With that, I'm going to ask for any final thoughts from the panelists. Anything you want to close out in saying about this, or anything really as it pertains to lung cancer, and then I'll jump into the housekeeping.
I think we've stated it all. Oh, go ahead, Jorge.
I was just going to once again thank our participants, thank the GoTo Foundation for getting the word out and for sponsoring this type of research, and thank everyone who really is out there being an advocate for not just for research, but for other patients, and making sure that everyone out there with lung cancer is getting the best treatment they can.
Yeah, I share those sentiments, and again, the how this is decreasing any stigma over lung cancer. We know that anyone with lungs can get lung cancer, and we just have to do this research and find better cures and better ways to treat people and find them and screen them. So just very grateful for this trial and for all the participants and their time.
Thanks, Barbara. Stephen.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Dr. Gitlitz and Dr. Nieva and Danielle again for having us on today, and the GoTo Foundation, like Dr. Nieva mentioned, for putting on this incredible research. It's never easy to hear those words, "you have cancer," and I think, for me, I can only speak about my journey, but it was really difficult to hear that at that age, of 29 years old, because I was supposed to be enjoying the benefit of youth, right, and good health, and so I think it's sometimes it's easy for people on the outside to look at young adults with cancer and say, well, they're full of energy and they can just bounce right through this, but we face numerous challenges. I mentioned this a minute ago, whether it's insurance, whether it's cost of care, fertility. I know that for myself personally, my wife and I are so blessed to have great insurance, and we're the benefactors of that in regards to helping bring our son into this world. But others aren't, and fertility is a big thing for young lung cancer patients. And so the fact that this study is going to hopefully just collect data that can increase more knowledge, more information, and hopefully increase positive outcomes for young lung cancer patients. I am just so grateful, and I thank you. I commend you for all that you're doing, and I am happy to recruit. If anyone has questions, please, if you're a young lung cancer patient, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Thank you, Stephen. So very, very appreciated everything you just said and all you do for GoTo Foundation, for the lung cancer community, for the young lung cancer patients out there. I cannot thank you enough. And to Doctors Nieva and Gilletts, I can't thank either of you enough for all the work that you are doing to help bring all of this great research to the surface and to light, and for participating today. And I echo the sentiment of all of those who participate in studies, this one and others. I mean, we simply cannot learn and move forward and do better without your participation in clinical trials and studies such as this. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I am going to finish up with a little bit of housekeeping. As those of you know, and Stephen knows intimately, and maybe some of you don't know, but Bonnie has written a book. It is called The Living Room, A Lung Cancer Community of Courage. It's currently available for pre-sale, and I know for the past several months I've been announcing a book launch date of May 4th, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, somewhat COVID related in delays, it will be May 18th. And I don't mean that Bonnie has COVID, I mean printing delays due to backlogs of projects. So it'll be May 18th now. So be on the lookout for that to come live and for us to be talking about it a little bit more intimately here at the Living Room. But you can do your pre-order right now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or of course on our website at gotofoundation.org. Our regular programming Living Room will be May 18th. We will be talking about the book. We're going to give you guys a sneak peek because that is launch day. Dr. Pasi Yane from Dana-Farber will be here along with survivors Hank Baskett, Jim Pantelis, and Gina Hollenbeck to talk about and give a sneak peek into what you can expect when you get your very own copy. So be sure to tune in for that one. Our registration is now open for our second annual Summer Jam virtual 5K Your Way, which is on June 26th. I know some of you watching may have participated last year. It was our first sort of leap into doing this virtual event. It was a national event. It was wildly successful and insanely fun. So please consider signing up, or at least go take a look on our website at summerjam5k.org to see what it's all about. It's a very fun day. And if you're more of an endurance athlete and you want to check out our My Perfect Marathon program, you can do that at myperfectmarathon.org as well. Another way you can contribute data is through our lung cancer registry. So please consider doing that. That is open to all comers, not just the young lung cancer patients that we were talking about today. And then finally, I want to re-thank all of you on the panel, those of you watching live, those of you who will come back and watch post-live. You are who we do this for. Thank you for tuning in today. Peninsula Television, of course, who is on the back end of this programming, helping us to bring it to you live. Our supporters, whom we could not do this without: Amgen, AstraZeneca, Bristol Myers Squibb, Daiichi Sankyo, Foundation Medicine, Genentech, Lilly Oncology, Merck, Novartis, Regeneron, Sanofi, and Takeda. Thank you for all your support and recognizing the value that this type of information from key opinion leaders such as Dr. Nieva and Dr. Gilletts can bring to our community. With that, I bid you all a wonderful rest of your day, and I will hopefully see you on May 18th. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, I'll be brave if you're brave. I'll be brave, but only if you're brave. And it could be just you and me. We'll be family. Just wait and see.